Okay. Sorry, everybody. I can't multitask. There you go. Malika is laughing because it's like I'm a woman who can't multitask. That is true. Okay, welcome to Minds, Connecting Minds, where we get together and we share our knowledge and our expertise and bright each other's evening. Today we're going to be talking about journalism and the internet. And oh wait, somebody's coming. And Lazy, can you introduce them? Because I can't multitask.
Okay, sure, no worries. I got your back. Okay, so we're going to start with Mônica Nóbrega, who is a journalist, and you need to mute someone there.
No, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Okay, sorry, Mônica. So let's start with Mônica Nóbrega. She's a journalist, graduated from the University Unesp, Universidade Estadual Paulista. Mônica is a quite traveled person. She has visited more than 50 different countries, and she is her specialization actually is focused on traditional communities and social movements, and she currently is working as a communicator for promotion of the human rights. And now, Mônica, the floor is yours.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My idea to this discussion was to think about internet as one of the factors that changed journalism and the communication as a whole. So, sorry, I have a written text because I am this kind of person. And I'm going to speak a little bit about information funding, the information production, and also the journalism, and bias. In these times we are living, which some researchers have been naming the age of attention economy. So I want to start telling you that some days ago, on Monday, my work fellows and I were discussing the few number of applications from the north of the country, from the north of Brazil, I mean, received in the context of a call for proposals designed to support grassroots organizations. I work for a national foundation named Brazil Human Rights Fund, and despite this name, we are not connected to any level of government. This is an issue that I explain many times a week. We are not connected to Governo Bolsonaro and any government level. The foundation's mission is to support human rights defense in our country. The method that the foundation uses to select projects to be supported are the calls for proposals. And if you have never heard this expression, I can explain. It's a public invitation for groups that defend human rights, in our case, in the foundation that I work for, to propose projects for the human rights defense, which will be supported with money and sometimes human resources, education, and so on. So we, the team of the foundation, we prepare a kind of public invitation for these groups to send us proposals to be supported. That's a call for proposal. So back to the Monday, this discussion in between my work fellows and I ended up with one of the members of the board telling me that my challenge in the next month is to find a way to better connect with grassroots organization in the north of Brazil through communication ideas. And At this point, I have to introduce myself to you a little bit more than what Laís did. Thank you, Laís. As Laís said, I graduated in journalism, but also in geography. And I'm saying that just because I'm very proud of my geography graduation. It doesn't affect that much what I'm going to say here. I worked 20 years as a journalist, mostly in daily newspapers. And I'm very, very glad to say that I don't do it anymore. Don't get me wrong, I know and I value the enormous importance of journalism for democracy, but now, as the communications coordinator in a supporting foundation, I feel that I can do much more for both journalism and democracy. Like my colleague, the board member, foundations around the world are convinced that communications will save projects, society, democracy, and even the world. Fausto probably know what I'm saying now. They hardly believe that communications and also the journalism is the key. And I believe it too. This subject interests me personally and professionally more and more. I have been reading, studying a little bit about that, giving my best to design projects, but I'm not a specialist. I'm very far from being a specialist in that subject. I didn't mention before that I am a master's student, and my master is focused on urban geography. I study motherhood and the urban life, the women's who are mothers' lives in the cities, and which is not so directly connected with the communication. So my post-graduation right now is not directly connected to communications. So listen to me, please, aware that I read, I do my research, but I'm not a specialist, as I said. In 2004, something happened that would change communications forever. In that year, the so-called Internet 2.0 was made possible. For you to have an idea, my first email, monicanobrega@hotmail.com, dates back from 1998, my first year in the college as a journalism student. The Internet 2.0 was not the same as an email, as a conversation one by one, or with a limited group of people. That was the magic for all of us to broadcast our ideas, also our lack of ideas, many of us, the lack of ideas. So hosted in the www, the World Wide Web, all of us had a new voice to say whatever we wanted to. Orkut was the first social media that we Brazilians felt in love with. And this social media landed in Brazil in that same year, 2004. Less than 20 years ago, do you remember? Less than 20 years ago, less than 2 decades. Those two innovations, Internet 2.0 and social media, were the seeds for what we live now, attention economy. On the internet, the most valuable commodity is people's attention. It's as simple as that. The more people stay connected to a content, a website, an Instagram profile, and so on, the more valuable it is. The attention currency serves, of course, to the advertising, ads by organizations that want to sell products and services, or also to deliver messages. Of course, they have they play a direct role that benefits both the payer and the recipient. And why I'm saying that? The basic mechanism of the attention currency is you pay attention to me, I deliver you the messages that you want. I have a personal example. I never blocked it. I don't know if I can say that, but I never blocked advertisement from shoes stores in internet. That's what I most like to buy. Of course, Google and Facebook and all the big techs knows that, and I thank them to deliver me those advertisements that I want to be in contact with, so I don't need to go to shopping malls, which I really dislike. So it's in the first idea is benefit for both sides. The problem is as the social media developers, all of them are concentrated at this moment and for years and years in the task of making you and me spend 1 more minute a day in their domains. So the social media are designed to keep our attentions more and more and more. And which leads us to the point that we can talk about fake news, or the news that people, bubbles and news and discussions that people want to be connected with. In I don't remember the word, but and because of that, people don't pay attention or are not in contact with all the other contents that they don't want to, but that makes them think about the world in a more plural way. There is, of course, no other reason for Instagram, for example, to concentrate, to be so interested in making us believe that it's possible to make money there on Instagram. Of course, the people are making money on Instagram, but probably you are not one of those people. I am not. This economy attention is the soul of the business model of some of the world's largest technology companies like Facebook, Google, and Amazon, and a few more. Actually, the concentration is very, very high. In the past, news outlets, for example, were based on the same logic. So, for example, in Brazil, we had along the 20th century, and also the very beginning of this 21st century, only 3 so-called national newspapers: Folha de São Paulo, Estado de São Paulo, and O Globo. All the others were and are considered local newspapers or local media outlets. And same happens with the TV. We have 3 or 4: Globo, Record, SBT, and that's it. But now the business model of these most prominent media outlets in the past went to bankrupt. Can I say that? Like teachers, this model went to bankrupt. Actually, it doesn't work anymore. People don't watch them or read them or listen to them enough for the advertisements to be consumed in the scale that they need to make money, for those companies to make money. So as the ads don't support the press anymore, what can these media outlets do to keep existing, to keep working, to do what they have to do? They were created to do. One interesting data that I found reading those articles and news about this issue was that only 3 big techs concentrate 2 in each $3 spent on advertisement in the United States. So 60-something% of the money for advertisement in the United States, it goes for only 3 big tech companies, which are, of course, Facebook, Google, and Amazon. In this scenery, communications in general and journalism particularly considering that journalism is necessary, but nobody really wants it, faces huge difficulties to keep walking. Especially digital native media outlets are devoting efforts to create new business models. Foundations like the one that I work for are one of the ways to build an environment where civil society really supports information production for their own benefits. Of course, you have most of those independent media outlets, they do have their own programs to ask for support to the readers, to the audience, to the whole audience. But this is still a very, it's a model that still doesn't support, is not able to support, especially because journalists, communications, and especially journalism are very expensive activities. Traditional media outlets, governments, politicians, big companies, and all kind of big companies, they attack these efforts, arguing bias in such journalism and such information. Along the 13 years that I worked for the daily newspaper O Estado de São Paulo, 3 types of stakeholders occupied most of the pages with their ads: autos, real estates, and governments. In these days that we are living, if you watch the TV or read the newspaper, you will see lots of agribusiness ads. We don't have to go far. This week, Estadão had on its website a text about a new graffiti painted in a wall on the central area of São Paulo. It shows a proud businesswoman, and it said there is something written saying that she is an agribusiness woman. I don't know if I can say that, agribusiness woman. But she is a businesswoman in the sector of agribusiness. This character painted on the wall. And this was painted by Cobra, which is one of the most succeeded grafiteiros. I have no idea on how to say that in English. One of the most prominent and most well-succeeded grafiteiros of Brazil. So,
Graffiti artist.
Graffiti artist. Thank you. It is a very expressive graffiti, with the message that that evokes empowerment, which is a word for this time we are living, and contemporary understanding of what art is. Street art is very contemporary. While this happens, the geographer Larissa Bombardi had to move abroad about 1 year ago after menaces to her and her kids because of her results on researches on agrochemicals. Baby malformations, early puberty, asthma, childhood cancer, and neurological diseases are among the consequences that the use of pesticides can cause in children, according to Larissa's researches. Also, according to her, in between 2010 and 2019, more than 3,700 children aged 0 to 14 years old were intoxicated with pesticides used in agriculture in Brazil. It's more than 350 children per year in this period of 10 years that she studied. And Estadão never said a word about those menaces, neither about the results of Larissa's research. Isn't that bias? Why bias is only the civil society supporting media outlets to make possible to that media to showcase other stakeholders and all other points of view. And I will finish my speech saying that what I want to do, and the main reason that for me to move from journalism to the communications for the human rights is that I want to use this micropower that I have to help paving the way for civil society funding of communications and journalism. Much have changed in the last 2 decades because of the internet. I am not optimistic, but I am hopeful that we can change more to our side. Thank you. And sorry for my mistakes.
Oh, Cindy was perfect. Thank you. Bravo.
Wow.
Well done. Oh,
I don't
wow.
talk anymore.
Yeah,
You-
and bravo for, sorry, Ali, but just to say that for exposing the biases of the media.
Yes, I saw many situations. I saw even worse situations, like changing texts to not to expose that much the friends of the house. Like, I won't say names. You are recording.
Better not, yeah.
Wise.
Better
Wise. Very sensible.
Yeah.
The way you're saying, like, how the media is supposed to hook us and get us addicted to just spend more time. Remind me of a TED talk. I can't remember who said it. It was definitely a TED talk, and she says the only people that refer to like their clients as users are drug dealers
remember this
and people from IT. Which I thought, hell yes.
Drug dealers and the internet.
Yeah, because we are users. So that's terrifying. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, very
Yeah.
nice.
Okay.
Think we're gonna move on, right?
Yeah. The next one then, can I present it?
Yes, please.
So it's Yara Moura, also a journalist. Well, the three of them are journalists, and her master degree is in communication from the postgraduate program in communication at UFF, Universidade Federal Fluminense. And she also advocates and research about the human rights communication, digital rights at Intervozes, where she is currently working. So it's your floor then, Yara Moura.
Okay, thank you, Lais. Thank you, M.I.N.D.s, for the opportunity to share, to talk about one topic that is super important for me, for my job, for my activism, and I think for all Brazilians and global people. I think Monica said everything I was prepared to share with you, but I will try to add some reflections from my research and my job on my activism on Intervozes. Intervozes is a civil society organization, was born 70 years ago, and so we worked around the big topic of human rights, communications, and digital rights and broadcast regulations. I think it's a big agenda. It's but since 5 years ago, we put our attentions on process of digitalization of society, the phenomenon of lack of access of internet in Brazil, and misinformation and disinformation and hate speech are phenomena that we work a lot. The first thing we talked, always we are invited to speak, to talk about misinformation, as that this problem of misinformation, fake news, is global and is complex. Because of that, we don't have, there isn't a magic solution for this. It's important to think ways to improve our autonomy, like users, like citizens who navigate on the internet. I think it's important, but I don't believe in individual solutions for this phenomenon. I think it's important ideas like, how can I say, training persons to recognize fake news, to recognize hate speech. I think it's important, but I think this problem should be faced with force more global, force more collective actions. Let me see my notes. It's necessary on one multi-stakeholder process could combine platforms like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter, Google, and the states and researchers and civil society organizations to fight against this phenomenon. I think the first step of this process is social media and digital platforms should provide more transparency around the content moderation and the way how the algorithms works. How we could recognize a fake news or denounce hate speech or fake if you don't have information about how platforms works. If you don't know, we don't know how algorithm decides what you can read, what you can't read, what kind of information it will be considered fake by the standards of platforms. I think it's important to think about this. I think it's necessary in the second step, to improve a media regulation, social media regulation of platforms, because I think it's necessary that the states could how can I say, let me think another way to share. It's necessary regulation to balance the big power of these platforms on the global society. At intervals and with another civil society organizations from Latin American. We are talking a lot about co-regulation. It's necessary a process of co-regulation, states and private fields together. Self-regulation is only a piece of this process. Besides that, I think it's important remember always that we in Brazil have a scenario of a lot of concentration of the media, and this is a factor that improve the development of fake news. The broadcast, the traditional media, the channels of radio and TV are concentrated on a so little number of groups, and it's this thing creates a scenario of a less diversity of ideas. The states should be regulation, the social media, the platforms, the digital media, but together in parallel, they should develop laws and regulation for fight against the concentration on the social media, on the digital rights, on the internet, and on the traditional media, like as Monica said. I think it's a second important point. The third point that I need to share with you, that's around the one thing that Monica said too. It's around the way the model, the business model of platforms that's based on the massive collect of our personal data and data. And I think it's important to fight against the fake news. We develop strong ways to protect our data, personal data. I think it's a way to combat the model of profit of these platforms. And if the platforms could be choose between their profits and our rights, we can imagine what they choose. And I think it's necessary laws, it's necessary regulations, and a combination around individual and social solutions like media education, media literacy, for improve capacities on the children and all the people to identify fake news, to fight fake news on the ordinary life, but it's necessary a big process of combination of policies and how can I say, advocate involving multi-stakeholder players like civil society, like how can I say, government states, like platforms and experts. I think it's important to see the phenomenon by misinformation and fake news always like a big phenomenon that we all we are involved, but not the solution not depends only uh, only you. I think it's important to invite to promote the more chats, more information spheres about this topic. But it's important always remember that platforms are bigger, are how Monica says, there are only business who maintain or maintain not improve their profiles during the pandemic. It's a big power, and for fight against the big power, it's necessary a large alliance between so many actors. And I think civil society and educators like mine have a role in this mission, but not only as could make their things different, totally different. I think it's so many ideas that I did share. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing.
Bravo. I'm very impressed with you.
Yeah. And congratulations on your presentation. And it was awesome. In English. Awesome. Congrats.
I know you're very nervous before, so bravo.
There is one thing that you mentioned about this media literacy, and this is something that I've been giving much thought lately, especially after a class I had with Fausto, because an impression that I like to think of myself as a critical thinker, but I know that I'm far from that. There's so much to consider and so much to learn still. But I remember one class I had with Fausto, we were discussing about the role of the president and the impression that the world has of him. And then he came up, he showed me like a research, his critical analysis of the article as a journalist. And then I thought to myself, man, like me, many people, most of the people actually, we do not have this critical analysis of the news because first, because I am too lazy for that. That's the truth, to analyze different sources of information. And two, there is this power, as Monica was saying, as you said, and these political and commercial implications and interests behind the news that we are not aware of, and how, to raise these and how to get to know that so that we can understand who built that information based on whose interests that information was constructed, if you can say like this, You guys feel free to comment, both Monica, Fausto as well, and Tamara, who's also here. You guys journalists, you know the business better than us.
That's a point I always struggle as well, like media literacy, because I don't get it. A country that we use so much internet, like Brazil, is huge, and people say we don't have it. And until recently, I was like, Huh? How do you mean we don't have it? Yes, we do. We know how to use the thing, but it's so much more involved into it, and I don't fully understand, to be honest. So if anyone want to expand, go.
Guys, don't be shy, please.
People are very shy today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if not, maybe we can further the discussion after Fausto, which is, sorry, who is the third presenter, the third speaker tonight. So let me introduce him. So Fausto is also a journalist, and he's been on the road for more than 20 years. He's co-founder and publisher at Ponte Jornalismo, which is an independent media outlet about human rights as well. And he's also the winner of a Vladimir Herzog Award. Sorry if I pronounce it incorrectly. And in 2014. And he is the co-author of the book M.I.N.D.s em Luta, 10 anos dos crimes de maio de 2006. And also he wrote América Latina, Comunicação e Política. So Fausto, please take the stage.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I have to say that I don't have anything more to say after Monica and Yara. So let's open to the questions to all the people. Could it be? No? No. I think they, both of them almost said everything that has to be said about that, but I will try to say something more, just as I have to say something to you. Let me see. When you talk about information, misleading, and things like that, we talk too much about fake news, and that is something that is roaring all of us because it's something that's very disturbing that we see nowadays. I especially too were very disturbing, especially in 2018 when the fake news were very intense and spread it everywhere, and during the elections. I remember some fake news very impactant. For example, the fake news of Dick Bottle. I put mamadeira de piroca in translate Google, and it translated like that. Dick Bottle. I don't know if it's correct, but it's the way that Google translated showed it to me. So we have fake news like the Dick Bottle, and we have a lot of fake news about Pablo Vittar, for example, because the conservative people who supported Jair Bolsonaro had a fixation on Pablo Vittar as a symbol of everything they hated, and all the fake news started with the same phrase: Pablo Vittar went too far. Pablo Vittar went too far, and Pablo Vittar will be vice of Lula. Pablo Vittar went too far, and he will be in the 50 reais note, the money. And Pablo Vittar went too far. He will present a new version of TV Criança Esperança. You call Criança Esperança Gay, Child Hope Gay. That one. We didn't know if we should laugh or if we should cry when that kind of bottle of Dicky bottle were appearing to us in that time. And that kind of people says that is an ecosystem of fake news because they are produced in a determined way by a lot of people linked to political people, and that's very, and that's a machine that is built with some intention and has some strategy of dissemination. So because of that, it's called ecosystem of fake news. And when people started to talk about fake news, I think that's something that disturbs me a little, because it seems like everything was okay in the news, or everything was okay in communication just before the internet, just before the social media. It's like people used to say, and now we are polarized. Now we have news that are not true. So you have to support the professional media. You have to read Folha de São Paulo. You have to read Estado de São Paulo, because they are the media who don't tell lies. And well, I think it's not exactly like that. And you heard to Monica talking about their job in Estado de São Paulo, and she gave some idea to us about that. I've been a journalist for a lot of time, and I worked in mainstream media outlets, and I know how biased they can be in their work. Mainstream media outlets don't make disinformation most of the time, but they do misleading a lot. I get these definitions by a teacher called Claire Wardon. She studies fake news, and she presents two definitions. In Portuguese, it's the same word. It's like desinformação. But in English, two different words with two different meanings. Misleading is information that is false, but the person who is disseminating believes that's true. It's unintentional lie. Disinformation is information that is false. The person who is disseminating it knows it's false. It's a deliberated, intentional lie. So I should say that in media outlets, people don't use it to say lies that they know that are lies, but they give information that believes they are true because of the bias they have. And when talk about bias in a country like Brazil, who has a great social inequality, so as Yara talked about, the media that we have in Brazil reflects naturally the social inequality that we have in Brazil. So the media owners in Brazil are traditionally white, rich men. Most of them linked to agribusiness or other traditional business. And traditionally, you don't have in mainstream media the voices of black people, the voices of women, and that the history is our history. For example, I've worked in Jornal da Tarde, that was a newspaper from Estado de São Paulo. I remember I was making a story about Campos do Jordão, and people just want to know about Fundi, just want to know about talk about the cold, how cool is the cold in Campo do Jordão. And I went to one of the slums, favelas in Campo do Jordão, and I showed that, well, for the people who live in Campo Jordão favelas, the cold is not so cool. And the people don't like that in the newsroom. People said, you are the kind of reporter who likes poor people. That was a joke. That reporter who likes poor people. And that kind of experience, I lived in all the places that I worked. I worked in agora São Paulo, from Grupo Folha de São Paulo, and I was a policial reporter, as people say, a reporter who talks about crimes. And I noticed very well that the lives of the people were determined, the importance of the news were determined by the skin color and the social class of the people. It was all the time like that. If you are white, if a white girl killed his parents in Campo Belo, it was a news that we would do forever. How he is enduring forever, Susana von Richthofen. If black people were killed in a favela, they were treated as a minor news, because there is an assumption that black lives don't matter. So I think that phrase that American movement created is precious. Black lives matter. Black lives matter, because it's exactly about that. For a media mainstream outlet who was so linked to the elites of São Paulo, the black lives simply doesn't matter like the other lives. And that's the history of the media in Brazil. It's the history of the violence. It's the history of genocide. In other places, you don't have a genocide. You don't have if you don't have the participation of journalists. For you make a genocide, it's so important to have the participation of journalists as the participation of armed people killing with guns. For example, one of the most horrific massacres in Brazil history, the Canudus Massacre that happened in 1898. More than 25,000 people killed. That only happened because the media of the time described the people from Canudus as terrorists, monarchists who wanted to bring the Republican government down. They say literally they were monarchists linked to monarchists from Europe, and with a lot of guns, with well-armed people. They will destroy our republic if we don't kill them. So and it was the same in 1964 when we have a coup d'état. I don't know if I say a coup d'état that started the military dictatorship. Almost all the main mainstream media outlets supported the military coup. For just one section, Última Hora, from journalist Samuel Weiner, but O Globo, Folha de São Paulo, o Estado de São Paulo, the media owners supported that coup in that time. So, and we see that the same is in 2016 when we have a constitutional coup that bring down the first women president in Brazil. And then I will mention just another example from Intervozes, for example, from Yara. they, with their voices, made a research about how was the coverage about social security reform, and that research showed that 64% of experts interviewed by the media outlets were favorable to government proposal. So we have a lot of bias in the mainstream media outlets that reflect the concentration of the media owners. And it's not so different when you think about the social media corporations that we have now. Social media corporations has a lot of different interests, and they move it according their interests. For example, in 2020, when it was clear that President Biden, that candidate Biden would be a good name from the social media corporations, they started to call fake news news about a laptop from Joe Biden's sons that indicated that Joe Biden was acting in a corrupt way in Ukraine. So news about that laptop from Joe Biden's son was labeled as fake news, and it was banned from Twitter, for example. It was banned from Facebook. And this year, we discovered that all the news were not fake, that were true news. And we are seeing the same when you talk about the Ukrainian war. Google is determined that we will not permit that content that exploits, dismisses, or condones, or not condones the Russia war. For example, if I want to say that the war in Yemen it's worse than Russia-Ukraine conflict, it would be understood as a dismissing of the conflict, and it could be limited. So we have a lot of biased information in the news, and we had always have that beside the media social, the social media, besides after before the social media, before the internet. But we also had something new that we didn't have. That is the opportunity of new voices getting to the media. That was internet brought to us. For example, when I graduated in journalism in the last century, in 1999, I was looking for the company that would employ me, because it was unbelievable that I could myself create a company. That's not so easy. That's not. I don't have a guarantee that the companies that we are building will last for the next year. But now we have more opportunity that we have before to make news, to make media outlets. And in the last 10 years, there was an explosion of different media outlets from people from favelas, media outlets from people from indigenous people from north and from all the parts of Brazil. You have Black movements, feminist movements, LGBTQ plus movements making their own media. So we have a plenty of new voices get much more attention than it had before, because now they can be heard more than they were heard before. and we have different models of business models that can support that kind of media outlets. For example, we have now non-profit media organizations. That's very different from what we had before. So we have much more voices talking. And we also have voices that are talking a lot of lies. So that's a very contradictory movement. Talk about me, for example. I helped a lot of people. For example, Julião, who is Monica's husband. We joined together, a lot of journalists, and created a media outlet who talks about human rights, who talks about racial questions, gender questions, in a way that we didn't see the media mainstream outlet talking about. So we are amplifying voices that were not present in mainstream media outlets. But as that's a very complex movement, because the same internet 2.0, as Monica said, that permit ourselves to create a media outlet like journalism, the same internet 2.0 that permitted to people from Favela da Maré exposed to everyone their version of the conflicts that happens in their place, that permits from Yanomami people tells what's happening in their territory, is the same in Internet 2.0 that permits fake news about Dick Bottles and Pablo Vittar went too far. So that's the reality we live in nowadays. That's something very interesting in the time that we are living now. We don't have anymore that great voice of truth that we have some years before. Because you have a great voice of truth. You have 3 or 4 in a place like Brazil, 2, 3 media outlets that were the voice of the truth. If Globo said something, that was the truth. It was very difficult to have information about something if that information were not in Globo, Folha de São Paulo, Estado de São Paulo. You have 2 or 3 voices of truth. Nowadays, you have multiple voices being disseminated. And people are confused. That's natural, because you have so many voices saying, you have media outlets, new media outlets linked to human rights, talking things that you not see in other place. You have the people from Mamadeira de Piroca saying about other things. So that's a more difficult reality that you have to live nowadays, because you have to live in a more diversified world of information. It's not so easy to get information that was some years ago. You just had to watch Jornal Nacional and read Folha de São Paulo, and you were very you knew about everything. At least you knew that you know about everything. As I say, a lot of information wouldn't bring to you. Now you have access to a lot of different voices, and you have to find your own way to find your way in that mass of voices. I think one tip that I would give to people who are so confused about news in these times, and I also feels confused about all this, is to notice that news are not reality in a strict way. News, all the news are versions of reality, and that's not a bad thing. I think when people discovers how biased news can be, they get frustrated and say, "Oh, so that is fake news. We have to go after the true journalists that says the truth." Well, good luck, but I think you won't get journalists that says the truth, because the truth is uh, it's not something that can be reached by human beings. All that you can say, all that you can get is versions of reality according to the bias that every human being has. So I think we can have a more mature debate, a more mature talking, if you don't classify the media outlets in fake news and people who says the truth, the good news and the bad news, accepting, or of course, the people from a madeira de piroca. That is fake news strictly in a strictly way. But when I'm talking about real media, it should be more productive and it should be a more natural talking if we accept that all the news are biased, are naturally biased, because all the human beings has their eyes to see the world, and you can debate it, if a news is good or not based in bias that they had, and not because they have a bias, because everyone has a bias, but you can, for example, for São Paulo has a neoliberal bias. There has bias, okay, but you could argue in a place like Brazil, who has so much social inequality, a neoliberal bias is a good bias to see that country, for example. So when you were paying attention to the news, don't expect an unbiased view. Be prepared to view the bias. And okay, they are biased. You have to accept their bias and talking about that with that perspective. Well, that's what I tried to say. Sorry for the English.
Come on.
You guys should never, ever, ever apologize for your English. Like, because one is good, two is like, no, don't apologize. You're doing fine. Oh, wow. I'm like, I don't even know where to start. So many interesting reflections, and I'm not going to speak. I spoke too much. Everybody, you guys can talk now.
I would like to say something. I remember about bias in how Fausto is so, he always explains things in a way that I understand. In the one day along the pandemic, I was watching live that he was one of the speakers in one of the hundreds of journalism festivals and meetings and so on that he is part of, also as an organizer. And he said something about that very white guy who works with advertisement, the one who owns W Brazil. How's his name? People, please help me. Washington Oliveto. Yes. You said something about Washington Oliveto's kidnapping. Kidnapping, is this correct? Sequestro? Yes. Yeah. And Fausto said to the audience that he was in the he went there to the place where Washington Olivet was hidden by the kidnappers, because I don't know the word cativeiro in English, so that's why I'm dando tanta volta. And Fausto said, I remember Fausto said, people were terrified by the conditions that Washington Olivet was living there, surrounded by dirty and open air esgoto and things like that. And he was thinking about the people who live at that place every day in their lives. And I was so, oh my God, yes, that's obvious, but it has to, we have to listen that from people who are able to think about these biases and looking at the other questions that are not proposed by media, by the biggest media outlets, because their worries are not connected to the most people's situations and lives and so on. Also, speaking a little bit about Yara's speech, I was listening to and I am one person that takes notes all the time. That's why sometimes my eyes look so lost, because I'm writing, I'm listening to, and I was listening to Yara's tips for identify the fake news and the bias of the news. And I was thinking that I appreciate so much the approach of Intervoices and its team, because they are thinking about that every day, and they are like Yara and her colleagues, they are thinking about that every day in their lives. I am thinking about that, but not every day, and it's so important at this moment for the democracy. It's so decisive, I would say. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Wonderful. Thank you for your insights.
I wanted to say something that when Fausto was talking about how many different media outlets we have today because of the internet that is being more accessible to everybody. So a lot more people are being able to share the news of where they're from and give their opinions about things. And the problem is that when you open up to everybody, you have all the goods, which is now we have access to news coming from places that we never had before, but also we're giving voices to fake news and the fanatics and the crazy people. And there's no way to control this because it's part of the democracy that we're living in. If we're open to one group, we have to open to everybody. Otherwise, it's not fair and such. But then it makes much more difficult to filter what's true, what's not, what's real, what's not. And much like lazy, I'm very lazy and I don't want to go find the source of the news. I just check how many people are talking about this. Okay, there's a lot of media outlets talking about this, so maybe it's true. But it makes it more difficult for the large part of the population to filter the news because we can't just trust Jornal Nacional nowadays. And I was talking to Fausto about this the other day. Like, we used to check the news 3 times a day: the morning news and the news during lunchtime and the news at night. And now we have the cell phone, we have Twitter, we have the news coming all the time. And how can you decide what's fake news and what's real when you don't have time to check? You're just like going very fast through the notifications. And sometimes it can be very overwhelming. So it's important that we still have people that are doing this for us are doing the filtering of the news for us, because I think most of us still need somebody to do this for us because we can't, or we don't have time, or we don't have the patience to do it. So thank you for people who are doing this.
Lovely.
Sibeli, that should be the work of journalists, but there are so many journalists saying so many things.
I think like the population, like Brazilians are very gullible as well because there's a lot of news we shared on WhatsApp groups. Sometimes I get it like those family groups, and I read something and I was like, this is clearly not true. If you took 5 seconds of your time to go and do a little bit of research, not like a lot, just like Google, blah 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 blah, you would know it's not true. So
Yeah, but let me try to add something about that, because I think one factor that it's responsible for the difficult to identify fake news. It's not only pay attention, but I think one factor is the inequality, the gap, the lack of access in Brazil. There are so many plans of cell phones and how can I say, partnerships with telecommunications, like, I don't know, Vivo, Claro, TIM, all who were in these plans. We have part of internet free for access, like as my partnerships said now, how can we check a new from my group, my family group on WhatsApp, for example, if it's fact or no, it's
you don't have access to the internet.
Yeah, if we only have access of WhatsApp and Instagram because they are free. We in charge of a researcher by
Never follow that.
Yeah.
For these people, the internet is WhatsApp. Just that's it.
Yeah. It's a totally.
Never thought about it, Yara.
Yeah,
wow.
It's a barrier.
It's serious. It
Yeah,
is serious.
Yeah. We have a illusion, a false idea, fake news that we have a lot of access of internet, all are connected all days in the same how can I say, in the same step, and it's totally false. Tamara was in charge of a research, a great research by Intervozes named Territórios Livres, Free Territories, Free Technologies, that we analyzed the access of internet by traditional communities from northwest of Brazil. And 90% of the families who are asked for research only have one cell phone for all members of the family, and the only cell phone it's connected on the internet by 4G or plans that when we, how can I say, I don't know, but
use the data.
Yeah. And WhatsApp is free or something like that, but we can't put a research on the Google or look for information on include on the public portals, public websites, include to ask for emergency help, auxílio emergencial during the pandemic. All these families have had a lot of difficulty. The majority should, I don't know if the past, should move to the bank agents to ask for this policy, the public policy on the context of pandemic. I think it's important to everything we can, when we talking about access, remember that there are so many different ways to access and to use internet. It's not equality.
Wow, thank you. I never thought of that.
In combination with the situation inequality access internet in information is in the same regions is the desert in the news in understand in the place the desert the news in location the news location. This is the situation and multiplies the state, the access, the checking is the vulnerable in to access fake news or fake news. Okay.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Thank you guys. Oh my gosh, so insightful.
I just wanted to say that while you were having this conversation, my aunt sent something on the family group.
Very
like,
timely.
Don't answer this phone number. If you answer, your phone will be cloned. And then she put another message. Do you think it's true? And I was like, you don't know if it's true, but you're passing the information along. Don't. Don't know. Don't pass it along.
Bless her. Old people. That's where we're going. You think we're not going to be just like that? You wait. Oh gosh, I do things nowadays that my niece, I remember doing to my aunties. Like I used to think like make fun of my aunties, and now I'm see myself doing the same things. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm old now. Sorry, changing the subject. Okay, everyone. Is there any more, or should we say goodbye? Can't hear anybody, so I guess it's a goodbye.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you very much, guys.
so much.
Thank you all. It was so good to hear from you, Yara and Fausto.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, you all, on your presentation.
It was an honor, Monica, Yara, and everybody.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It was very, very, very good. We're very privileged to have this network.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Bye.